mud hit her face before she even heard them coming. 3 cadets, none of them older than 22, none of them with a single combat deployment between them, had come around the corner of the barracks at a dead run. The biggest one, a broad-shouldered kid named Hargrove with a jaw like a cinder block and sergeant's stripes he'd earned 3 months ago, had his shoulder down like he was hitting a tackling sled. He drove it straight into the side of the woman standing at the edge of the path and sent her sideways into the drainage ditch without slowing, without looking back, without a single word of apology. She went down hard, left knee into the gravel, both palms into 6 inches of cold, standing mud. Her kit bag landed 2 feet away, half of it spilling onto the wet ground. A water bottle, a folded map case, a small black notebook sealed with a rubber band. Hargrove glanced back once. "Watch where you're standing," he said. His 2 friends laughed. One of them kicked the water bottle further down the path as they passed. She did not move immediately. She stayed exactly where she was. Both hands in the mud, head down, wet hair across her face, breathing in a slow and careful rhythm that had nothing to do with pain and everything to do with counting. She was counting to 4. In, hold, out, hold. She had learned that in a cave in eastern Afghanistan, with a piece of shrapnel lodged 2 centimeters from her spine and no one coming for 11 hours. She had learned that the body will do almost anything if you give it 4 seconds of silence to decide. Then she stood up. She did not wipe her face. She picked up the notebook first, then the map case, then the water bottle. She placed each item back in the kit bag with the same unhurried precision she used for everything. She looked once in the direction Hargrove and his friends had gone, and whatever was behind her eyes in that moment, it was not anger. It was something much colder and much older than anger. Before we go any further, if this story already has its hand around your throat, hit that subscribe button right now and stay with me until the very last word. Drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I love knowing how far these stories travel. Now let us go back to the beginning. Her name was Major Elena Voss, and she had been standing in that exact spot for a reason. She was 41 years old, and she looked, to anyone who did not know what to look for, like she might have been a base administrator or perhaps someone's civilian contractor, or possibly the kind of woman who showed up to military facilities because she had a brother or husband stationed there and hadn't found the right building yet. She was 5'6". She wore no rank insignia on the plain olive jacket she'd pulled on over her civilian clothes that morning, because she had flown in on a red-eye from Stuttgart and had not yet changed. She wore no jewelry. She carried a kit bag, not a briefcase. Her face was angular and quiet and gave away absolutely nothing. Her hands, if you had been close enough to notice, told a different story. The knuckles were slightly enlarged on her right hand. The index finger of her left had been broken and set without medical assistance sometime in the last decade, leaving a small lateral deviation at the middle joint. There was a burn scar on the inside of her left forearm, maybe 3 inches long, that had healed silvery and tight. These were not the hands of an administrator. She had arrived at Fort Delman's training facility at 0640 with orders to conduct a 2-day readiness evaluation of its combat preparedness program, a program that had been flagged 3 times in the last 18 months for evaluation scores that climbed without any corresponding improvement in field performance. The base commander, Colonel Whitfield, had not been informed of her specific rank or role in the evaluation chain. He had been told only that an inspector was coming. This was standard. You did not tell a patient a specialist was arriving if you wanted an honest look at the patient's actual condition. She had been standing at the edge of the barracks path because she was reading the morning training schedule she'd taken from the notice board near the gate. and she had been reading it for approximately 4 minutes before Hargrove's shoulder found her rib cage. She finished reading the schedule now, there in the mud, and tucked it into the map case. She had made a note. Hargrove's full name was on the duty roster. Cadet First Class Marcus Hargrove, Squad Leader, 3rd Platoon, assigned to the Close Quarters Combat Rotation from 0800 to 1000. She had also seen, from the schedule, that 3rd Platoon's rotation was being observed this morning by visiting evaluation staff. That was the note she'd made. Not about the mud, not about being knocked down, about the timing. She had 30 minutes before the observation began. She spent those 30 minutes in the female officers' wash facility near the command building, where she changed into her service uniform, pressed and correct, and clipped her rank insignia to her collar. Major's leaves, 2 gold oak clusters on each side. She looked at herself in the narrow mirror above the sink for exactly 3 seconds, then picked up her evaluation board and walked to the training ground. The man who had built Elena Voss was not a man she had chosen. You rarely choose the person who shapes you entirely. His name had been Master Sergeant Carl Dupree, and he had been 53 years old when she met him. A compact, unhurried veteran of 2 Gulf campaigns and 1 classified operation in Kosovo that he never described in any detail, but that had left him with a hearing loss in his left ear and an absolute conviction that the most dangerous thing a soldier could become was predictable. He had been the kind of trainer who never raised his voice. In a training environment built on volume, on sergeants who screamed themselves hoarse and used volume as a substitute for precision, Dupree had spoken at the same measured level whether he was delivering a compliment or telling you that what you had just done was going to get your entire team killed. He said the quiet ones were the ones you needed to watch. He said arrogance was loud because it needed to cover the sound of its own hollow interior. He said the moment you decided a situation beneath your attention was the moment that situation would end your career or your life. Elena had believed him abstractly for the first 6 months of her training. She had believed him completely after the 3rd month of her first deployment, when a 24-year-old translator from a village outside Kandahar, a slight, soft-spoken man that half her unit had dismissed as a liability, had walked directly into an ambush point that 3 experienced scouts had cleared and walked back out alive. Because he had noticed the way the dust was disturbed 15 feet off the road in a way that did not match the wind direction, and he had mentioned it, quietly, to Elena. And Elena had stopped the column. Dupree had died of a cardiac event 18 months ago, in his sleep, in the small house outside Fayetteville, where he'd lived alone since his wife passed in 2019. Elena had learned about it from a forwarded email. She had been in the middle of a readiness evaluation in Ramstein at the time and had not been able to attend the service. She had written a letter instead, a long one to his daughter, and she had been more honest in that letter about what she owed him than she had been about that debt to any living person. She thought about that letter now. Crossing the training ground toward the observation post, her boots finding solid ground with each step, the mud on the knees of her previous trousers left behind in the wash facility. She thought about the part where she had written, "He taught me that being underestimated is not an indignity. It is an advantage. The person who looks past you has already lost the first exchange." She had written that. She believed it. She had spent 15 years proving it. The CQC observation bay was a low concrete structure on the western edge of the training facility, open on one side to give evaluators a sight line into the full training floor. When Elena arrived and took her position at the end of the observation rail, 2 base evaluation officers, both captains, neither of whom she had met, glanced at her and moved almost imperceptibly further along the rail. This happened sometimes. They had not been briefed on who she was. They saw a quiet woman in a pressed uniform and made a calculation. She let them make it. Below in the training bay, 3rd Platoon was assembling. 16 cadets in full kit, organized into 4-man fire teams, running a breach-and-clear scenario through a mock building interior. And there, at the front of the line for the primary breach team, was Cadet First Class Marcus Hargrove. He was exactly as large as he had seemed an hour ago, and he moved through the pre-scenario check with the practiced confidence of someone who had done this exact exercise enough times to stop being careful about it. He called out the team positions in a voice calibrated to carry, not to communicate, Elena noted, but to be heard. There was a difference. One served the mission, the other served the ego. The scenario clock started. Hargrove's team hit the first room correctly. Clean stack, proper angles, the number 2 man covered the far corner before Hargrove finished clearing the near one. Elena made a note. Then the second room, also clean. The third room is where it came apart. The mock scenario included a civilian element. A seated figure in the back left corner of the third room, placed there to test whether the breach team would distinguish between threat and non-threat before committing to a response. It was a standard test. It was in every evaluation checklist at this level. Hargrove's number 3 man called civilian left at the door. Hargrove moved past the figure without acknowledgement, focusing on the tactical target on the far wall. And in doing so, he crossed directly in front of the civilian position, breaking his own team's sightline, violating the established stack integrity, and in a live scenario, putting himself between a potential uncleared threat and his support element. The scenario ended. The floor evaluator called the time. Hargrove pulled his helmet off and looked up at the observation bay with the expression of someone expecting acknowledgement. Elena wrote 3 lines on her evaluation board. Then she looked up, and for the first time since she had arrived at the rail, she spoke. Not loudly. To the captain standing 3 feet to her left. Who cleared the civilian in room 3? The captain turned. He looked at her rank insignia. Something shifted behind his eyes. A small, rapid recalibration. No one, ma'am. The breach lead moved past without a secondary check. That is what I observed, Elena said. She wrote a 4th line. Please have the breach lead report to the evaluation bay at 10:30. The captain said, Yes, ma'am, and his voice had a quality it had not possessed 2 minutes earlier. Below, Hargrove had not heard any of this. He was laughing with his number 2 man about something, helmet under his arm, the morning's work apparently complete in his own assessment. He would understand more about the morning at 10:30. The breach scenario ran 2 more times with different teams before the rotation ended, and Elena observed both iterations with the same focused attention she had given the first. 3rd iteration was notably better. A cadet named Reyes ran the breach lead position with a methodical patience that Elena found worth documenting on a separate line, the kind of documentation that followed a record upward. At 10:28, Hargrove entered the evaluation bay. He had not been told who had requested him. He had been told only that an evaluation officer wanted a debrief on the 3rd room incident. He came in with his helmet under his arm and a set to his jaw that said he expected to explain himself to someone and had already decided his explanation was sufficient. He saw Elena. His eyes went to her rank insignia, then back to her face. Then, and this was the moment Elena had seen 100 times in 100 different rooms, his expression did something involuntary. It reorganized itself, very quickly, into something more careful than whatever had been there before. She did not make him stand. She gestured to the chair across the table. Sit down, Cadet Hargrove. He sat. He placed his helmet on the table. He had not spoken yet, and his silence had a different quality now than the silence of the woman he had shoved into a drainage ditch 2 hours ago. Hers had been chosen. His was happening to him. Elena set her evaluation board on the table between them. She did not turn it so he could read it. She left it facing her. "Walk me through your decision-making in room 3, she said. "From the moment your number 3 called civilian." Hargrove took a breath. He gave his explanation. It was not a poor explanation by the standard of someone who had not been thinking carefully, which was its own indictment. He spoke about momentum of entry, threat prioritization, the tactical target on the far wall. He used the right vocabulary. He had absorbed the curriculum. What he had not absorbed was the reason behind it. Elena listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for 3 seconds. "You moved across your number 3's sight line," she said. "In a live scenario, if that civilian was a secondary threat, your number 3 cannot engage without the risk of hitting you. You eliminated your own team's coverage to save yourself 4 steps. That decision, made in an actual operational environment, does not cost you a training point. It costs someone their life. Possibly yours." Hargrove's jaw tightened. "With respect, ma'am, the civilian had already been identified as non-hostile by the initial call." "An initial call is an initial observation," Elena said, "not a clearance. There is a difference. It is in your training manual, Section 7, Paragraph 3. It is also the kind of distinction that becomes instinct with sufficient practice. And the reason it has not become instinct for you yet is that you are moving through these scenarios with a level of certainty that your current experience does not support." He was quiet. "You are a good technical cadet," she said. "Your team positioning on rooms 1 and 2 was correct. Your entry timing was sound. You read threat angles well. You have the foundation. What you have added on top of that foundation is a confidence that has outrun your experience by approximately 18 months. And that gap is exactly the size of a mistake that ends careers." She let that sit. "I am also going to tell you something else," Elena said. "And I am going to say it once, because it is not the kind of thing that belongs in a written evaluation. But it is the kind of thing that will determine whether the report I submit about this facility reflects what I observed in the training bay or what I observed at 0700 this morning." Hargrove went very still. Elena's voice did not change. It was the same measured level it had been through the entire debrief. Dupree's voice. The voice that did not need to be loud because it was already inside the room before it arrived. "A woman was standing at the edge of the barracks path reading a posted schedule this morning. You hit her with your shoulder at a run and put her in a drainage ditch. You did not stop. You told her to watch where she was standing." Your companions laughed. One of them kicked her water bottle. Silence. "That woman was me," Elena said. "I was wearing civilian clothing because I had come directly from a transatlantic flight and had not yet changed into service dress. My rank insignia was not visible. I was carrying a kit bag, not a briefcase. You saw someone you assessed as beneath your attention, and you acted on that assessment without checking it." Hargrove's face had gone the color of old concrete. "You made a mistake in room 3 today because you trusted your initial read without verification. You made the same mistake at 0700 this morning. These are not 2 separate errors. They are the same error expressed in 2 different environments. And in one of those environments, the consequences of that error are not a training mark on an evaluation board." She picked up her pen. She looked at him for a moment. "What I am going to write in this report," she said, "is that Cadet First Class Hargrove demonstrates strong foundational technical skills and requires structured mentorship focused on verification discipline and situational humility before advancement to field command track." That is an honest assessment. It is also a recoverable one. What I am writing in this report has nothing to do with what happened on that path this morning. That is not how I conduct evaluations. She made the entry. "What you do with the information about this morning," she said, "is your own matter." She closed the evaluation board. "Dismissed." Hargrove stood. He retrieved his helmet from the table. He was at the door when he stopped and turned back, and the expression on his face had something in it that had not been there when he came in. Something that was going to take him a while to fully understand. But that was the beginning of understanding. "Ma'am," he said, "I apologize for this morning." Elena looked at him. "I know," she said. "Dismissed." He left. She sat alone in the evaluation bay for a moment after the door closed and looked at the table in front of her. She thought about a cave in eastern Afghanistan and a piece of shrapnel and counting to 4. She thought about a letter to a daughter in Fayetteville. She thought about the way Cadet Reyes had cleared every corner of room 3 without hesitation, and without any apparent need for anyone to notice that she had done it correctly. She opened the board to a fresh page and wrote Reyes's name at the top with a separate notation, the kind that followed a record upward. Then she stood, picked up her board, and walked back out into the morning. The evaluation continued for another 36 hours. At its conclusion, Elena submitted a full readiness report to the base commander, Colonel Whitfield, that identified 11 specific process gaps in the training program, recommended 2 cadets for accelerated development review, and proposed a restructuring of the breach and clear curriculum that removed 3 redundant exercises and replaced them with 1 higher fidelity scenario that would force the kind of verification under pressure that the current program had been training around rather than training for. Whitfield read the report in her presence. He was 60 years old and had seen enough evaluation officers to recognize when one had done the real work. He looked up when he finished. "This is the most thorough 2-day evaluation I have seen in 6 years," he said. "Your cadets are capable," Elena said. "They need better pressure. Comfortable training produces comfortable fighters. The environment is not comfortable." Whitfield nodded slowly. "Is there anything specific I should know about any individual in the program?" "It's all in the report," Elena said. "I noted what I observed." She did not mention the drainage ditch. She had not included it in any documentation. It was not relevant to the readiness evaluation, and relevant information was the only kind she put in reports. As for Hargrove, he requested, 2 days after Elena left Fort Delman, a meeting with his platoon commander. In that meeting, which was private and which no record was kept of, he said that he believed he had a gap in his development that he had not previously acknowledged, and that he wanted to be placed in the advanced verification track, which was the harder and slower path to field command, because he had recently been shown that the gap between what he thought he knew and what he actually knew was exactly the size of a career-ending mistake. His platoon commander agreed. He was placed in the track. He graduated from it 14 months later, 3rd in his cohort. He never knew Elena's full record. He never knew about the 11 classified operations, the 3 commendations, the citation she had received in 2019 for a decision she had made in a firefight in the Kunar province that had extracted 7 personnel, under conditions that the after-action report described in the careful language of official documents as unsurvivable. He never knew about the shrapnel or the 11 hours or the counting to 4. He knew only what he had seen in an evaluation bay at 10:30 on a Tuesday morning. A quiet woman with a pressed uniform and an evaluation board who had told him one honest thing about himself and had not used it as a weapon. That was enough. There is a kind of strength the world does not recognize until it has no choice. It does not announce itself in the morning. It does not ask to be seen. It stands at the edge of a path reading a schedule and goes on reading it even after it has been knocked into the mud, because what it is doing has not changed and the mud is not the point. The people who dismiss it are not enemies. They are, Most of the time, simply people who have not yet been shown what they are looking at. The showing, when it comes, does not need to be loud to be permanent. Some lessons arrive in a shout. The ones that stay usually arrive in a quiet room, across a plain table, in a voice that does not need to rise to reach the place inside a person where real change begins. Strength that has been tested does not need to perform. It simply continues. And that continuation, steady and unhurried, is what separates the people who are remembered from the people who are merely loud.